Welcome back, everybody, to Two Guys and a Stack of Comics. My name is Reed. Along with me is Mike. Mike, it is finally here. The dawn of the DCU after a failed DCEU that made a lot of us very sad about DC movies. After a lot of buildup, a lot of hype, the firing of Henry Cavill, the firing of Gal Gadot, clearing the decks for everybody. We finally get a movie. James Gunn of Guardians of the Galaxy fame gives us his Superman film. We are going to go ahead and do a review and a spoiler review at that. So if you have not seen that yet, we will dive into kind of full spoilers with the movie. We're going to discuss the characters, our thoughts on the overall plot, and where we think the future of DC is. Mike, before we jump into specific characters, just if you kind of had to give your thoughts after seeing this movie, what was your gut reaction when you walked out of the theater?
It was a fun movie. It was good to see Superman being portrayed as Superman, and overall, it was a good movie. Lots of kids going to see it. I like that. My son's going to see it again tonight, so with his friends. So I'm very hopeful. How about you?
I was super conflicted. I told my wife who I went and saw it with, it's only the second movie I've ever walked out of a theater, and I didn't really know how I felt about the movie. The only other movie that ever happened with me was the James Bond movie Skyfall, which I thought was a brilliant movie, but I kind of hated that James Bond sort of lost to that movie. And so I
Yeah.
remember telling her when we went and saw that 10, 12 years ago, like it's a confusing movie for me because from every standpoint, it's great, but that just felt wrong. And this movie's very different than that. But this is only the second time I've ever left a theater, and I was like, I don't know how I feel on that. Like you, what I think really did stick with me, it was a fun movie. And I did see a lot of kids having fun with it. I will say it was probably a little goofier and kind of more childish than I thought it would be at times. But I have to say, as me and you who have been on here quite often talking about how this medium has gotten away from kids and has skewed more towards the 35-year-old than a 5-year-old, while there were moments it was not in alignment with kid stuff, I did appreciate that if you're going to err towards being childish or overly mature, childish might be the way to go. So I think there was some good things there. But yeah, I didn't leave the theater like one way. I'll have to go see it again. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. It was a very, very weird kind of feeling with it. We'll kind of go through here, and what we'll do is we'll break down each of the characters, kind of our thoughts on them. We'll look at what we actually saw on the screen and kind of contrast it with their comic book counterpart, and then talk a little bit about the plotting and future DC. So we'll start with Superman, probably the guy who had the most pressure in this movie, David Cornsweet. Replaced a guy you and I both liked, but felt the writing failed him in Henry Cavill. What did you think about David Cornsweet as Superman? How did that kind of hit you?
I liked his character. I like that he seems younger
Hmm.
in some ways and very very driven, right and wrong. And he has the good moral compass that we all missed the dirty dark days of DC,
Yeah.
where everyone was trying to deconstruct Superman. He was very hopeful, aspirational. I thought he did a great job. Um, and I know the costume, some people say the costume was a little weird. I don't know. I just rolled with it. And
It fit for this movie, I will say. For the tone they went with, that costume did fit pretty well.
yeah. So I don't know. I really liked his performance. I thought he stayed relatively true to the character and got back to where we wanted Superman to be. So I was very glad to see that.
Yeah, I thought he killed it. I thought he did an amazing job. It's interesting in that, like, I did a video a couple weeks ago on here about ranking the Supermans, and I think Chris Reeve is always going to be number one. I think Chris Reeve he's sort of like Sean Connery with James Bond, where that's the icon, that's the standard, that's the guy, and the material that Reeve got is probably the best material any Superman's got. When I watched this, the first thing that popped in my head is this is kind of like the Roger Moore James Bond version of Superman. It's goofier. He's got to act off of a dog. He's dealing with baby Joey and kaiju and metamorpho, and
Yeah.
he has he doesn't get a ton of the serious dramatic scenes, but he still felt the same way I thought Roger Moore always felt like James Bond. He felt like Superman in this movie. He was
Yeah.
earnest and that came across. He was hopeful, as you pointed out, aspirational. And I think the weird thing I would say, the only complaint I'd have with it's maybe more the tone of the movie, but somewhat with Superman is it did feel a bit of an overcorrection from Henry Cavill. And that I think Cavill too dark, a little too morose, a little too tortured alien space Jesus Zack Snyder kind of character. This one, Clark wasn't really a huge part of the movie at all. There's very few Clark Kent scenes in the film, and so it felt he almost felt unrealistic, it was a different kind of tone. But I thought he killed it for the material that he had. He was the best part of the movie, in my opinion, by far. And if I was ranking the Supermans, he's definitely at the top tier. I don't know if he's Reeve, the guy on the CW show, maybe a bit ahead of him, but he killed it. He did a great job. Pivot to Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane. Another, one of the interesting for anybody in Superman movie. There's been so many of these portrayals of these characters. How did you think she did as Lois?
This is the different Lois. But one that us Xers could relate to, she kind of comes from that New York punk rock kind of vibe, which would be unusual for a journalist of her stature, how she's normally portrayed, like is this, upper echelon of a serious journalist.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the fact that they snuck in there that they were already together. It was already a thing. So there was none of this dating. And she
Superman.
already knew that he was Superman. I did kind of like that. I did kind of like that spin on it. But she didn't get as much character development. Well, maybe she did, but
Very, yeah.
definitely wanted to know more about her. And I do like the fact I do feel like they had some chemistry on screen and that she was a good match for that Superman.
Yeah, I thought she was pretty good. I don't think she was like remarkable or anything. I didn't watch it and go like, oh my gosh, that's Lois Lane. In the way that like Margot Kidder, when you watch her here, like that felt like the
Right.
character off the page. I think she's better than a lot of the Loises that we've gotten. And I do think there was some cool relation. I think the best decision they made in the movie was bypassing the whole finding out Clark is super. We've seen that played out so many times. I
Yeah.
thought they had very real sounding conversations as a couple together for this ridiculous world, and I appreciated that
Yeah.
like their arguments kind of highlighted the highlights of both characters, and that Lois is the character who questions everything. Clark is the one who just looks at things as black and white, good is
And
good. And I thought that
that
dynamic was good and they acted well off of each other.
that one scene where the space anemone is kind of like
In the
being
background,
fought in the background. I just thought it was classic James Gunn to just have something completely ridiculous going on where the two characters are having a normal conversation. Oh, the Justice Gang will take care of that. Don't worry about it. She's like, "What is that, Clark?" It's like,
no,
"Oh,
but I think we can talk a little bit about James Gunn and the plot and the overall stuff. I do think that's a great example you brought up of I think where the Clark Lois relationship, and I think because so many of Lois's scenes involve her relationship with Clark, because those every one of those serious scenes kind of has a thing like that that undercuts it with the joke thrown in. It did take away some of the potential for her to really carry some of those scenes. And depending on whether you love James Gunn's humor or something like that, your mileage is going to vary. I would say, if I had to give him grades, I think Corn Sweat's an A, and I think Rachel Brosnan probably like a B. Not bad, not good. She didn't take anything away from the movie. I don't know that I watched this and I was like, that was amazing. She really made the movie better, but she also just did her job and got through, and I think she was okay. Last character we'll talk about individually before we get into the supporting cast. Lex Luthor. We get, I'm trying to remember the actor. Nicholas Holt. He played Beast in X-Men. I'll always kind of see him as that little boy in that movie about a boy. It's crazy that that guy is so much old and older. It makes me feel old. But what did you think about this rendition of Lex? How the actor carried it?
um." So positively, I love how the movie really made me hate him.
Yeah.
So that was a good sign that they created a good, strong villain. I do think he did feel a little bit young for the role. Like I wish he would have been a little more I don't know, what am I trying to say here? I wish he would have been a little
He seemed
more,
a little out of control at times, and you wish maybe I thought I wanted to see a little more poise. I thought
yeah,
some of the gun to see like him knocking over the coffee cups and things like that for his underlings to pick up. That doesn't really seem like Lex Luthor. That seems more like a Riddler, kind of move. Is Lex Luthor? I always viewed the great Lex Luthor as like if Bruce Wayne was evil, it
yeah,
would be Lex Luthor. And so I agree there was a little immaturity that showed. Now, again, I don't know if that's the actor or the writing. My guess is more the writing of James Gunn in it.
yeah,
Where I think you make a great point that I 100% agree with. You hate him. You want Superman to just deck him at the end of the movie. And it's a
yeah.
great that Superman doesn't, but what he did, he played smug so well. And you
I
could,
know.
and I think
I know.
it's funny because you see interviews with the two actors, you can tell they like each other. You could in the movie, man, it just he has this searing hatred of Superman that shines through in all those scenes, and I thought that was good. I also did like that they let Lex do some genuinely disturbing things as far like when he shot that guy in front of Superman and things like that. They didn't have an underling carry it out. They let Lex genuinely be evil. They didn't go for this whole let's humanize the villain and make you care about the villain and understand. He's just an evil jerk, and some of
You
that
know,
it
you know
worked
they've
really well.
done you know they've done their job when you really hate the villain. You know
Yeah,
they've done their job. Yeah,
no, and
yeah,
I think that's the strongest thing that he makes is look, in a comic book movie, I should dislike the bad guy quite a bit, unless it's a villain like Magneto, where nuance is built into the character where you sort of sympathize with him. Lex Luthor, while yes, he's been had some depth and things added to him at times in comic books, largely he's a character you hate. He's a smug jerk who just wants to ruin Superman just because he's jealous. And I
yeah.
think they did a pretty good job with that. So yeah, I think he did well. We'll kind of pivot to the supporting cast. We'll start with sort of the Justice Gang. So we get Guy Gardner, we get Mr. Terrific, we get Hawk Girl. How did you feel about those characters in the film and the performances that they had with it?
I didn't like Guy Gardner, but you're not supposed to like him.
Hmm.
Um, I loved Mr. Terrific. He was awesome. Um, Hawk Girl didn't get much, but what she got, she was a decent Hawk Girl. Um, I would have liked to see Hawkman too, maybe. And I don't know. I don't know why they decided to go with Guy Gardner rather than Hal Jordan. But
Yeah,
you know, I don't know. This is probably more of a Gunniverse
this
decision.
was yeah their inclusion to me struck as James Gunn in that
Yeah,
you know I think Nathan Fillion, the guy who played him, played Guy Gardner really well. Like you said, you're not supposed to like Guy Gardner. He's supposed to be an unsavory jerk that you kind of want to punch. But he got some decent moments. Mr. Terrific was the most developed of the three, and he got by far the best scene. And I think they used him really, really well. Hawk Girl, like you said, yeah, kind of a non-factor. She was nothing against the actress. She just didn't have a lot of work to
they
do
didn't
with
put
it.
her in that much.
I think the weirdest thing that I had with the Justice Gang in the movie, and this was something I just wondered why they put in, they made a big deal that they were like corporate superheroes, that they worked for Stag Industries and all that. But then that really never factored into the movie. So what's weird is like you kind of had this thing. I thought that was going to be a deal as far as maybe, they're corporate, so they won't do certain things, and Superman inspires them to kind of change. And I guess that kind of happens with the end scene where they go and stop the war that Superman wasn't able to get to. But there just didn't. It seemed undercooked, and I think a lot of like you said, these seemed to be included so that James Gunn could put his type of humor and his type of characters and his friends who are actors in the movie. And while they're not bad, I again, it's probably because I'm such a fan of the character. But the scene where Mister Terrific and Lois break Superman out of that dimension, I'm like, it would have been so much better had it been Batman. Like that you have that Lois can't find anybody, and then Batman shows up and helps free him or something. It felt undercooked, and those characters don't have a real history with Superman, and so it almost seemed like someone just took, darts and threw them at a DC board of characters and were like, okay, we're using these three. And they're not bad or good. It just was underdeveloped.
I
Um,
did love the homage to the Super Friends cartoon with the Hall of
that
Justice.
was that was,
That was kind of cool to see,
and I
but
think the
I
Green
just felt
Lantern
like
stuff looked pretty good.
the Hall of Justice was it was done a disservice with those three at the helm.
Yeah.
Like I said, if you're gonna have Hawkgirl, you should also have Hawkman. They're such a great team together. Why not have both of them? You know,
No, and I think this is where we can kind of start talking a little bit about the plot a little bit more within this in the spoilers with it. Um, some major
what-
stuff happens in this movie. I mean, there's literally a dimensional rift that's going to rip the world in half.
yeah,
And the whole thing that's interesting is how this world, what James Gunn did with this movie, he drops you into a world that already starts. I think that's the weirdest thing with this is there's an opening crawl, kind of like Star Wars a little bit, but it explains like superheroes been around for 3,000 years. Superman's been active for years. And so one of the things that was interesting is you have these major things happening, maybe because in worlds other crazy stuff's happening, but it just did seem a little weird. Like, why are these the only characters involved? Especially if you're going to drop us into a universe that's already well established, where it's like, okay, why would you not have had Wonder Woman or Batman or, as you said, Hal Jordan or something like that? Especially because the Justice Gang characters to me there was really no specific reason it had to be them in this movie. I think that's the weird part with this is had there been something a little more baked into the plot of these are corporate superheroes, they only act in a certain way, they're a little bit jaded, and there was a little bit of like they're not going to break Superman out of jail, but they didn't really go into it enough to justify why it's these three. I was really hoping they'd do something like Kingdom Come in the comic books where Superman's like on retirement and this new generation of heroes is all very brutal and visceral and different and Superman inspires change. That just seemed undercooked and maybe it was cut, maybe there was supposed to be more material, but it just seemed underserved for those ones. I think you also can talk a little bit about the cast of the Daily Planet. We get a little bit of Jimmy Olsen, and he was good. Perry White is barely in the film. I mean, I
I
think
wish
that
we would
that
have
was the
had
weird
more
part.
Perry. I do.
Well, and I think that's part of why I think the Justice Gang didn't really work for me in the movie. Is it felt like this was a Superman movie that James Gunn strangled with his James Gunnisms, and we didn't get the Superman stuff because we don't really get a lot of Clark Kent. We don't get a lot of reporting from Lois. There's a little bit, but it's tenuous at best. There's no Perry White scenes. There's no Daily Planet interaction really, other than one scene where Clark goes to work. And that's the part I thought that was a little bit frustrating. Is it was like the movie's doing so much that it didn't have time to do stuff that should be in a Superman movie. And it's like I don't know how you make it if Perry White can't be a character in the Superman movie. When is he ever going to be a character? It just seemed very weird that they sort of wrote a lot of that kind of into it. Um,
Can
Crypto.
we can we
Go
talk
ahead.
about crypto?
Crypto. Yeah, we'll pivot to crypto.
Crypto, I loved crypto. The boys loved crypto. Yeah, crypto kind of stole the show a little bit. I loved crypto. I don't know if and I when I saw the previews for it, I thought I'm not gonna like crypto. I'm probably not gonna like crypto in this movie. They're probably gonna play him wrong. But that dog gave a heck of a performance, and I loved how they wrote him. He's the lovable rogue, element of chaos in any
Hmm.
given scene because you didn't know how he was going to react. And
Yeah,
I think it's a great element for the younger audience to really pick up and relate.
yeah. Crypto's an interesting one for me in that I liked his inclusion in the film. It definitely made it different. You under like this is embracing the comic books, and so I thought that
Yeah,
was kind of cool. Um, I was okay with everything Crypto was in until they had Crypto be like the finishing move to take out Ultraman, kind of thing. Where I'm like, okay, I don't need him that involved. But I agree what I will say and where I can't complain. Um, the kids in the audience that I was in the theater that I was in. Really enjoyed every time that character is on screen. They loved that part of it. And if that's a thing that brings kid audiences in to make them more receptive to superhero movies and make the superhero genre meet the audience that it should meet, then I'm all for it, even though I may sit there and roll my eyes a bit at it.
Yeah.
If it works in that regard, then that's a good thing, and I'm not going to complain about that. And I think there were some genuinely great scenes with him in there. We'll kind of pivot a bit to the overall plot and then talk about James Gunn and DC to sort of close this out. Um, Mike, for me, the interesting thing with the plot, this kind of turned into a shut your brain off sort of movie, and that there's so much stuff happening. You can't really think too much through it. And like one of the weird things of this is this whole thing is Lex Luthor wants to destroy Superman. And it's like he already has a clone of Superman that looks exactly like him. Like you would have thought that would have played more of a role. It kind of seemed like that was just, hey, we're throwing this in as a shock in the end. I think plot wise, there's a lot about this movie that didn't make a ton of sense. But I do think, do you attribute, if there's plot holes and things, do you attribute that more to, hey, they're just having fun? Or did some of the plot elements sort of bug you where things didn't exactly line up?
I walked away with it like it's just going to be a fun movie. And I like that uh, James Gunn got to have fun with it. And I think when you let him off his uh, leash, James Gunn delivers stuff like this and people like it. So I think as far as the master plan, the Kevin Feige of the new DC universe or whatever, I don't know what's going to happen. I just know that it was a good, fun movie. And I don't know if there's going to be like, a spin-off where Guy
Well, we know
Gardner gets.
Supergirl's next, and that's already completed filming. So that's the next.
Oh, they've
Uh,
already done the
yeah,
filming for
that's
Supergirl?
already done. I think that's why she had the cameo in the movie. The weirdest thing for me with this movie, we'll talk about the two kind of major changes in the film. Jor-El being evil. We get that basically Jor-El is Omni-Man, where he's essentially like Clark, go
Right.
dominate the planet and marry as many women as you have to and create a. I personally thought that was stupid. I didn't like that very much. I don't like when they changed. I know they did an evil Jor-El kind of thing in the comic books recently. To me, that was a frustrating piece, and that it kind of, in a way, ruins the potential of other characters. In that, like, what's Zod going? If Jor-El is this, what is Zod? Like,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, like that can't really be as much. And the other part is like, why would Kara be a good person than a Supergirl? In that, like, if Krypton was this weird Omni-Man-esque society where it's like go dominate a planet sort of thing. Why would she? I just think that was a weird twist. I understand why it was in the movie. They wanted to have some big thing that Lex Luthor could lord over him and kind of show that Clark's humanity was more important than his Kryptonian heritage. I personally didn't like that. I think the other part that was kind of weird, how much humanity instantly turns on Superman because of that. The end of the movie, they would still be against him because apparently in this universe, he's been doing great things for years.
Yeah.
This video comes out, they all hate him. Nothing resolves the video. He just kind of stops Lex Luthor. But like society would still seemingly dislike Superman, except for all okay with him. I just feel like some of that stuff didn't land. The James Gunn piece of this, I think this is one of the biggest complaints I'd have with the movie and my biggest fear of the film. And I think this is why I walked away half happy, half not. There's so much humor in the movie, and depending on how much you like humor in films or not. To me, Mike, it felt like every time there was an emotional beat, James Gooden couldn't help himself. He had to throw some joke or some song in there. Did that bug you, or did you just take it again as, hey man, this is a fun movie, go with it or not?
I took it as a fun movie, and I think, you know, I mean, you got to take your victories where you can get them with DC movies. Yeah, yeah. And if people are liking it, I'm happy. I will say about the Jor-El thing, I do feel like eventually it could just have been all a ruse from Lex Luthor, maybe in the end. And like
Hmm.
he deep faked all that footage or whatever. And
Yeah, I think it would have been better had they gone with that. Um, No,
They could
it's
still, in a
interesting.
future movie, they could
Yeah,
still.
I mean, I guess you could retcon it. Yeah, it's just weird, and I think James Gunn's such an interesting director, and I feel like I'm gonna struggle with DC because of him, and that
What, what about your brother? He's a big Superman fan.
he kind of walked away the same way I did as far as the big thing that me and him talked about when we talked about the movie was this felt like there was a great Superman movie here that was kind of strangled a little bit by the James Gunn of it all. Of
The
like, I here's
Gunnism.
a great Superman scene, but we need Metamorpho. Here's a great Superman scene, but we need Metamorpho's kid. Here's a great Superman scene, but we have to throw Crypto ripping Lex Luthor. Like the scene to me that just threw me out of the film a little bit. Super Lex and Superman confront each other at the end, and Superman's given this great speech. It was the only like real okay, here's a Superman moment kind of thing about his humanity is what makes him. And it's really well delivered, but and it's punctuated by Crypto comes across and rips Lex across the room, a la Hulk ripping Loki across the room, kind of thing. And while it delivered some laughs, I'm like, man, that was a poignant scene that could have made this a little more epic, but we're not going to do that because it's a James Gunn movie. I think the same thing, that conversation that Superman is having with Lois, and you have the little dimensional imp in the background, the Justice Gang's fighting.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like took away from the drama of that scene. And again, if people's thing is, hey, Reed, that's supposed to be in there because it's more for a younger audience, then cool, right? That if that's the argument, it just felt like even the action scene with Mr. Terrific, where him and Lois go to save Clark, it's punctuated by a weird song choice. And it's like this could have been a really epic scene. Instead, you've got some sort of punk rock beat music going on in the background. I didn't. It's such a weird movie for me because I cannot say that I disliked it, but I also wish I could have walked out going, man, I loved this. And it was absolutely how I felt watching the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and that I liked so much of those. And the weirdness I just attributed to it's Star Lord, it's Rocket Raccoon, it's Groot. I think
yeah.
the weird part for me is this was Guardians of the Galaxy, but you're dealing with Superman. And I guess I just wanted a little more epicness, a little more emotional resonance out of a Superman movie. But like you said, if folks are enjoying it, it wasn't a bad time. And I will say, I would much rather have DC go fun than dark, morose, Snyderverse, depression, Batman having a mental breakdown with a kryptonite spear about to stab Superman. If
Me
I
too.
just feel like there's a middle ground that they could meet, and DC kind of and they just I think this was a bit of an overcorrection, and maybe they'll kind of steer it evenly. What I will
Probably
say is
not.
watching this movie,
Probably not.
the weird thing with this movie, because I before this I've heard a lot of people talking about, hey, we should get the Pattinson Batman into DC. No, like watching this movie, no, Pattinson's Batman belongs nowhere in this DC universe,
No.
and I don't know that I'd want James Gunn to touch a character like Batman, and that what I was hoping for was I thought James Gunn would go, okay, Guardians of the Galaxy is something I can do. Here's Superman, and yeah, it'll be a little bit like me. And it felt more like instead of James Gunn writing more of a Superman film, he wrote Superman to be a bit more like Guardians of the Galaxy. And depending on whether you love those movies and love James Gunn and that kind of humor is your thing, I think it will determine whether or not you like this or not. Last thing we'll kind of conclude with Mike after this. Are you more optimistic about the future of the DC universe with Gunn at the helm, or are you less optimistic? Like if you had to pick one of the two, are you looking forward to what's next, or are you more like, eh?
For young comic book fans, I'm excited that if this gets them into the comic book shop and gets them buying more comics, I'm all for it. And buying movie tickets and parents and being able to go take their kids to these movies, I'm excited for it. Like if he puts out, a trilogy or a half a dozen of these films and they're a little bit goofy and lighthearted, but more aspirational, like some of these characters are meant to be. I'm all for it. Because I do feel that the genre as a whole needs to turn around from that dark, morose kind of,
Deconstruction. Yeah.
yeah, yep.
No, it's interesting in that, like, personally, it probably made me a little less optimistic about the future of DC. But that conflict I felt when I was done watching the theater was, if this is like you said, if this is more to get kids to get into superhero movies again and err towards, let's make a movie that would appeal more to a 5-year-old than a 35-year-old, then I'm all for it. I do think there's a middle ground. Superhero medium should be a kid's medium.
Yeah.
And if we as adults can enjoy it, fantastic. But these characters need to be for the intended audience, because you and I both have talked about this a lot on the channel. We both had those moments as kids where you get the wonder of superheroes. That moment you read your first Flash comic book, or me read my first Batman comic book, where you fall in love with the medium, you fall in love with the characters, that imagination, all of that. And if these movies can do that for generations of kids, where instead of, Superman snapping Zod's neck and Batman torturing people and branding them and things like that, if we can get to more, hey, kids had a fun time and learn to be responsible like Superman, then I can't hate that. I can't be negative, even though it may
Right.
not be personally my taste, and I may have like 5 or 6 times I roll my eyes. If it does that, then I can't hate it. I admire them for trying that at the very least. Would
Me
be
too.
interested to see though, what do you guys think below? Did you guys get a chance to check out Superman in theaters? What were your thoughts? As always, folks, thank you so much for watching. God bless you. We will catch you in our next video, folks.
Thanks, everybody.